Yeah, why are people interested in gender? I think one of the things which I have done probably a little bit different to a lot of trainees, and I'm not quite sure exactly why, is that I guess from where I am now, I start to see that what my aim is not to actually be a woman, is to transcend the limitations of gender. Because, I mean, I can still dress like this, and most people perceive me to be female, but I think personally, I guess I don't sort of really see myself as either. I see myself as Julie Peters, and I don't see myself as a gender. And in the long term, I'd really like to see gender disappear as a category. When you actually start to try and then belong to the other gender, you start to realise that their limitations are just as big and just as stupid as the ones I didn't like in the first place. So then that's when I started to move, I guess, a bit further and start to think, well, what I really wanted to do is just be me. And that sometimes meant, well, maybe having an aesthetic sense, which in our culture is sort of more considered to be appropriate for women. But I still like to be, and yeah, the stereotypes about how women and men think. For example, one of the things people say is that men think logically, women think intuitively. Mm-hmm. Well, I'd like to think that I think both logically and intuitively where appropriate. And in fact, Martine Rothblatt, in her book, The Apartheid of Sex, basically suggests that all of it, there are as many genders as there are people in the world, if we were really honest about it, rather than trying to stereotype people. In the 1970s, homosexuality was considered to be a disorder by the American Psychiatric Association, and in the 70s it was taken off. Mid-70s, people lobbied and got it taken out. And in fact, just recently, so last year I think it was, a group called Transgender Nation raided a meeting of the American Psychiatric Association. I can't say psychiatric, that's okay, I guess that. They raided a meeting to demand that transgender be taken off, be removed as a disorder, because I personally don't see it as a disorder. I actually see it as me trying to find the real me in this society which says there are two genders, and I didn't fit either of those. Mm-hmm. The legal situation in Victoria at the moment, and it varies from state to state, so I'll talk about Victoria because that's where we are, is that for a start, transgendered people are not protected from discrimination under the Equal Opportunity Act. And then following from that, a lot of people who change gender then want to get a job. And one of the main things you need to get a job, it's variable, is your birth certificate. And if you present looking like me and your birth certificate says male, which mine does, well, a lot of employers find that a bit stressful, and a lot of people aren't employed for that reason. One of the problems with changing gender on your birth certificate after the operation is it puts a lot of pressure on you to have the operation, because you're not considered to be like a real transsexual or until you've had the operation by the medical profession or by the legal fraternity in that case. And when you think about it, the time you most need protection is when you first change over. When you're trying to come to grips with it yourself and you just start to culturally live as a woman, that's when you find that you get the most discrimination. In Australia, it's illegal to discriminate on the grounds of sex or gender. Why then is sex or gender on anybody's birth certificate? Why do you need it on a birth certificate? Why do you need it on your license? Why do you need it anywhere else? People could, one of the arguments is, we need to be able to identify you. But that cuts it down from 1 in 18 million to 1 in 9 million. Really, what a big help that is. So I don't really see that's really valid. And our argument is that gender should not be on any papers. I'm a member of TLC, which interestingly, TLC in New South Wales means the Transgender Liberation Coalition, which is really pushing for law reform, and they have had some successes. In Melbourne, we've decided we like TLC, which is Tender Loving Care, but we've decided to call it Transgender Liberation and Care, because we felt that we wanted to change the emphasis to being a support group. So one of the things we do is we have monthly meetings, and we do fight for law reform, but we also try and support each other as much as we can. I think one of the things I like about the TLC is there are a range of people in it. There are people who are just starting off, and there are people like myself who've changed over quite a while ago, and there are people who pass and people who don't pass. Passing becomes a big issue for transgendered, because a lot of transgendered would like to just disappear into the suburbs and live happily ever after, but I don't think that many actually do, and I think it's probably a reasonably unlikely occurrence, because of all those 3 million straight people, well, how many straight people there are out there in Melbourne, not that many of them actually live happily ever after in the suburbs. I think it's a pretty unrealistic dream. We often talk about issues they're having at work, which I found a solution to that 7 years ago or whatever, so we can actually share those experiences, but also that, and also I suppose gives them a bit of an aim to say, oh well, you can actually live just a fairly ordinary sort of life. Once you've changed over, you don't have to live in a transsexual ghetto, which probably 20 years ago most transgender did. They did actually live in a very transgendered sort of ghetto, and they were sort of scared to move into the mainstream society. And partly that was because of the very high levels of discrimination. Transgendered, even if they were very well educated, found it very hard to get jobs, and so the only other people they found really were very friendly were other transgendered, and there's quite interesting relationships between the gay community and the transgender community, but even there's still a lot of interestingly, a survey done in 1994 by Roberta Perkins in Sydney showed that the group that most discriminated against transgendered was in fact gay men. That discrimination by gay men comes in a couple of forms. I suppose one is a sort of a sense of misogyny. I asked one gay man why he thought it. He said, well, some of them were jealous because they felt, here you are, somebody who's really a boy who can go and pick up a straight boy. I thought, oh yeah. Another sort of reason I think I've heard of discrimination against trannies by gays is when particularly when they're first changing over and they don't look ultra glamorous like some of the drag queens around town. And I think that there's a lot of gay men, particularly around the clubs, really get into this beauty myth concept that you're of high value if you're beautiful or if you're glamorous, whereas if you're looking tragic, which is really a cruel way to put it. And I use that word because that is the word which is often used. You're not really welcome in gay space. And at the other end of it, I suppose there's also a number of women in the lesbian community who see people like myself as men trying to sneak into women's space and invade women's territory where they really want private space away from men. I changed over fairly late in my life, and where I had actually worked out most of my big issues before I changed gender, as far as the public was concerned. And what happened there was that because of that, I think people found it. I'm trying to think which is the most important issue. I think probably the most important issue was the fact that when I did change gender, I did it with quite high self-esteem. I actually said, this is the way I'm going to assert me, and this is the way I'm going to do it. I think a lot of trainees when they first change over really hook into the cultural myth, which is very tranniephobic, and so that they actually apologise for themselves to a large extent. So I think coming across as strong was one aspect, and I think another aspect is the fact that I can actually pass, which is, it worries me at one level because, but I guess it's human nature. I think I'm discriminated against less than other trans because I look like, the gender I was saying I wanted to be. But where I am now, having I really feel that I think it's a really big step to actually then say, or a good step rather than a big step, to say that I think it's important to actually leave behind the limitations of our cultural concepts of male or female and move into finding your own way of being.
What do you do?
We run Victorian Network, which is an under 26 youth group for young women questioning their sexuality. Yeah.
Have you been nominated this year?
Yes, for two categories. It was really quite unexpected. We sort of just found out on the weekend. So,
why did you choose pink tonight?
I closed my eyes, put my hand in the wardrobe, and that was the first thing that came out.
I think I'm nominated, yeah.
What for?
For Favourite Venue Worker Girl Bar, Club Deluxe.
Why are you here?
Why am I here? To Rainbow Awards. It's a very special night.
There's something in your nose.
I was wondering why I didn't smell right today.
It's just stunning.
Yeah, I broke it. It's sort of been sticking out ever since.
Why are you at the Rainbow Awards tonight?
Well, I've been nominated for an award, much to my surprise.
Congratulations.
I nearly fell off my perch. As president of PFLAG, I'm here too, and my daughters are supporters and I'm blessed with a gay son, so that I'm really very lucky, aren't I?
There's going to be a little bit of glamour here tonight.
There will be very much glamour, I can assure you. It's going to be fantastic.
And the shows?
Fantastic.
Who's won an award?
This one here.
Oh, stop!
She has.
Her.
What have you won an award for?
I don't know.
Are you nominated tonight?
No.
Why aren't you nominated?
I don't know if I am or not. I might be.
You might be.
I'll find out when I get in.
Has Bent TV been nominated for any awards this evening?
Not as such, but there are a few personnel from Bent TV that have been nominated.
Who?
Julianne Goss is down for the Media Award.
Wonderful.
Yes, and I'm down for the Arts Achievement Award.
What do you think of the venue first?
I think it's rather sumptuous, really, isn't it? It's a bit grand.
Appropriate.
Very appropriate for such a grand event.
You're no stranger at the Rainbow Awards.
No, I'm not, no. This is my fourth one.
Fourth? And have you been nominated tonight?
I have been nominated, yes.
For what category?
I think most popular drag and Golden Rainbow.
Tell me about your dress.
Actually, it's my daughter's, and it's a Gautier, and I pinched it tonight. I'm worried it's too short.
Mothers are getting younger and younger.
Thank you very much.
Well, this is a production number I use on stage, actually, and this is just a little something she had in the closet.
Does it hurt to wear this?
No, not at all.
Spikes here.
Deadly tits.
And then a little kind of chastity belt area.
That's right.
Gosh, you're very brave wearing this. And your partner here who's in brass.
Yes, all brass.
You must spend a fortune on brasso.
Oh, absolutely. Why not?
I've only just come back after 21 years to my hometown of Melbourne, and to see all of these people still alive, still celebrating their gayness is just incredible.
Yeah, the Victorian AIDS Council undertook a restructuring process after my resignation and the resignation of many members of the board. And people would know that some of the things we've done include the appointment of a new Chief Executive Officer, Susan Harbin, whose responsibility is to manage and facilitate change in the organisation. And most recently we've announced that the people living with HIV/AIDS program will merge with the support program, which provides care and support for people living in their homes who are living with HIV, and we were actually going to establish an autonomous people living with HIV/AIDS body which will look after advocacy and the representation of positive issues to government and the community at large. The AIDS Council received a carers grant last year from the government, which involves the purchase of a building. At this stage we're looking at a site in Prahran, and that is to co-locate our Claremont Street site, which is our administrative site, with the Positive Living Centre, which is currently in St Kilda, which provides a drop-in centre for people living with HIV. It's actually really very exciting for the AIDS Council because it means that we'll be locating all of our services, at least the main ones, in one site, with an opportunity to offer services elsewhere throughout the city, and we're looking at regionalising some of our services as well, looking at north, south, east and west services. So there's a whole range of things happening. The AIDS Council is the largest provider of services to people living with HIV/AIDS, of course, in Victoria, but it's actually the second largest AIDS council in the country, so it's a big organisation. AIDS has been with us and our organised response to it for about 15 years, so we're well into kind of our adolescence in terms of the movement and the provision of services. At the same time, we're actually facing a whole lot of changes. There have been remarkable improvements in the delivery of services and, most importantly, improvements in treatment of people living with HIV/AIDS, and what we call combination therapies have meant that many people are reporting greater and longer periods of wellness, and so are getting less sick less often. And so this is actually changing the way we deliver services and all of the things that are impacting upon us. It's taken an enormous toll on the gay and lesbian community through the losses particularly of gay men and men who have sex with men through the virus. And so the AIDS Council is trying to accommodate all of that. There are communities who are most at risk, injecting drug users, men who have sex with men, and now Aboriginal Australia, that's recognised, and really that's where HIV is having its greatest effect. Education is targeted to those groups, so there is a very important role for education, for reinvigorating our education programs about HIV prevention, and probably most importantly now, in actually looking at HIV treatments education and the education of people who are living with the virus. So there are a whole range of things which we need to do. The other, of course, is to move into Indigenous communities and to educate there, and that has to be driven by Indigenous people. But the threat to those communities by HIV/AIDS is enormous, and that's really where the virus has moved to in Australia. My view is that as a recipient of government funding, as a non-government organisation that has to be innovative and creative, we've got to move out. We've got to go to the areas of greatest need. We've been running a support program for gay men in Geelong, and it's actually blossomed. The other is in the Dandenongs. That has also blossomed. We need to start providing services to the people in greatest need where there aren't commercially available clinics, etc. So their challenge is to reach out, to be more innovative, to be more dynamic, and to go to where the need is greatest. Liberty, which we're called now, or the Council for Civil Liberties, is a non-government organisation. It's an independent, membership-based organisation that sees its job to campaign for and advocate for fundamental human rights and freedoms. We're membership-based, so people can join us and participate in that work, and we kind of act as a watchdog. We have a board of management, like most community organisations, which direct our policy. There are two forms of rights, in a sense, the civil and political rights and what we call economic, cultural and social rights. So that's one division. Civil and political rights, the traditional rights like freedom of expression, freedom of belief, the right to vote, the right to participate in government. Economic, social rights, cultural rights are things like the right to an adequate standard of living, the right to housing, the right to a job. They are fundamental rights. And what we do is we say, what are the things which are the prerequisites, the absolute necessary things to guarantee human dignity, to guarantee a full life, to guarantee a life in which you can exercise your gifts and your talents. And we say they're things like the right to equality before the law, the right not to be discriminated against, but there are also the things like a right to an education. And we see those kind of things as fundamentals which need to be provided for, which are the kind of conditions under which you live a dignified life. Any minority group often feels the threats to their rights more than any other. And clearly, history shows us that minorities are more vulnerable when it comes to having their rights threatened. Racial minorities, ethnic minorities, sexual minorities are certainly the first to have their rights abused. And Australia's history of gay and lesbian rights activism and human rights breaches of gay men and lesbians tells that story. It says that yes, gay men and lesbians, by virtue of their sexuality, are vulnerable to human rights attacks. Only a couple of years ago, a gentleman by the name of Greg Brown demonstrated that on the death of his partner, he could not get the same rights and entitlements despite their long-term relationship as a heterosexual partnership. The death benefits that were payable under his partner's superannuation and death insurance were not payable to his same-sex partner, despite the fact that they were living in a relationship, a committed one, a de facto relationship in a sense, a same-sex de facto relationship for many years.
I get out there because I enjoy it and it's fun, and I don't know, I'm trying to be serious at the moment, but all I really want to do is just sit down and take it all in.
How's it been going?
Fantastic. Really, really well.
It's probably one of the smoothest shows I think I've ever seen.
Well, thank you very much.
You're one of the dancers.
Yes.
Out there shaking your thing.
Shaking my tush.
I mean, if I'd known we're going to win, I would have worn something nice, you know?
Oh, excuse me, I couldn't help but notice your hair.
Oh my goodness.
What's it made of?
Rubber.
No, tonight I'm just here to get pissed and eat, drink and be merry.
I went to the very first year at the Palace, and this is my only other year since then. And I'm whooping it up. I'm having a ball.
Hello. Are you having a good night?
Having a fabulous time.
Is this the first Rainbow Award you've been to?
Second.
Really? What was it like last year?
Was good, very smoky from the pyrotechnic.
You've got a lot of fans over there.
Uranus.
Tell me about your hair.
It's very heavy.
It's unbelievable to be here. It's to see the community together. The solidarity is incredible, and the following, the leaders like Jan Hillier, Renee Scott, Terry Tinsel. It's just awesome to be swept up in that emotion. It's fantastic.
Well, it makes me feel very proud. Very proud. And the gay crowd now, like years ago when I first started coming out, we never had anything like this. And just to have been a part of it in the beginning is a real thrill for me.
I was around for 26 and a half years as a business, and I've been around a lot longer than that as a person, so I think it's about time to give something back.
God, you must have a mantel shelf full of these.
Oh, I've got two.
Oh, that's enough. One each side.
The bookshelves.
It's a very confronting night, though, isn't it? All these divergent elements of the community all thrust in the same room together.
You're gorgeous.
I got it from
I love the fact that you're a drag queen that just buys to wear hair. I think it's wonderful.
What does it feel like being on stage and looking out and seeing the community all in one place?
I think it's great. I hope these Rainbow Awards continue for the next 100 years. And I love it that everybody's together, gay, lesbian, dirty, filthy cross-dressers, women with short nails and chipped nails. It's wonderful.